Welcome to episode 4 of Sounds Like a HR Problem, where my co host Ashley and I break down real life situations and we talk about what happened, the lessons learned, and things that we might do different next time. So, for today, we had a couple stories prepared geared around difficult terminations. We felt that this would be just kind of an ongoing thing that people are always interested in learning about and how to handle difficult terminations. And because it's always awkward, right? It's something that you never want to do, but being in HR is inevitable. It's part of the job. So we wanted to go. So you want to start first, Ashley?
Yes. First I want to talk about how studious I look today. Do you love
Yeah.
my glasses? No, it's funny. Just quick sidebar story. Um, I started getting to where I felt like I needed readers, but the problem with working with readers is that if you look up, everything else out in front of you is blurry, right? So it's like not really ideal when you're working, especially if you're like trying to talk to somebody. So I went to the eye doctor. It turns out I have perfect 20/20 vision still. Yay me. Um,
Yay.
but they were like, well, if you just want something to help. So I got transitions. They are the coolest, by the way. So the bottom is like for looking down at reading. The middle is to see your computer, and then the top is to see out. And
Oh,
they
that's
have
cool.
the blue light like filter in them and stuff. It's like a game changer. So just a little plug there for all of us over 40.
Yeah,
Uh,
I texted my optometrist the other day. I'm like, do I need some readers, or do the blue light lenses actually work? Because
yeah,
because one day I was just sitting at my computer and my eyes were just like
they
tired.
just get
You know.
tired. Yeah, especially with jobs like ours where we're like on a computer all day. Like,
Yeah, but then I've been reading a lot of research where they're like, oh, it's bogus. The blue light doesn't help. But then there's some people that are like, oh,
scared by it.
yeah, they're like, I tried
Um,
it. It's helped me. I don't
I
know.
just know these make everything sharper, clearer. So like if I'm reading, everything looks like so much sharper, which is nice. Especially at night or like, the end of the day and you're tired. But
So
anyway,
for
back
so
on
yeah, so for our younger listeners, this is what middle age conversations sound like.
topic. I got some readers today. Yeah, no. It, but I mean, I was impressed that my eyesight was still like 20/20
That's
because
good.
um that it does start to decline from what I've heard over 40. So anyway, back on topic. So yeah, as Yang said, terminations are never uncomfortable. I would say for smaller organizations too that don't have HR, generally it's somebody else in the organization that's having to do that termination, right? So an
Mhm.
owner, a manager. And so for people who haven't experienced as much of that in their career or, owners that's really never been in their wheelhouse, like to have to manage, it can be extremely stressful going into that, right? Because you're not you're not emotionally prepared. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've had to sit in, perform terminations, and it's still never easy. And I think that there wouldn't be the human in me if it wasn't always a little bit uncomfortable, right? It's not like we enjoy that part of our job, or we shouldn't. I mean, you shouldn't get joy out of it because
That reminds me of do you remember that George Clooney movie where his job is to travel
sure,
yeah, that's his
yeah,
job. He just goes around and just fires people.
yeah. And Anna Kendrick is like, how do you like this is terrible. How do you do this for a living? And he seems so cold about it, right?
Yeah,
He's like, this is the most terrible job I've ever had. Yeah.
yeah, because he's
Um,
gotten so numb to it, right?
right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I can put a game face on, right? When I go to a termination, I can be serious and I can get through it. But there's still times I walk out of a termination and I feel like, oh, there's like this pit in my stomach where I'm like, I just feel terrible for that person because at the end of the day, that that person has a long road ahead of them, right? Like regardless of how bad of an employee they are or whatever, you're still, that's their livelihood. That's how they put food on the table. That's how they, support themselves and their families and whatever the case is. And you've just pulled that rug out from underneath them. Maybe there's unemployment, maybe there isn't. How long is it going to take them to find another job, like, and apply and go through that? I mean, we've all been there, right? It's it's not a good feeling. But I think for a termination to go well as it can, that being prepared for it is key. But I'll just kind of share some stories with you guys about some ones that I had to do that were on the more difficult side, right? I've had things thrown at me where I haven't always been ready for them too. So one in particular that comes to mind is I had an executive. So this was more of a layoff situation that was happening, but we as an HR didn't catch wind of it until like right before it was happening. Or the decision had just been made and we were being called in to kind of like, get ready to have the conversations. And the company had decided to do a termination right before Christmas.
That's terrible.
It's terrible. It was,
Yeah.
we all voiced that we were not thrilled about that because of the timing. Like, we're going to ruin somebody's Christmas, but from a business standpoint, it kind of had to happen because of financials, right? Because and listen, I don't think that financials should always come into play with those decisions, but that
Yeah.
was management, their reasoning was, hey, we need this salary off the books, like, and so we can close it all out, right? So anyway, I've done layoffs too before the end of the year before, but this was not an ordinary one because he was an executive, right? So it's a little bit different situation because one, we're down an executive. There's a ton of people who reported up through him. So we had to figure out like what we were going to do to manage all these people, first of all. And then second of all, he's at a very high salary, so that's difficult from the aspect of like, most likely he's the breadwinner in his household and he's supporting the household. And, he's probably, they always have that adage of like, you end up like, be careful of giving somebody a raise because they will then raise their, standard of living. So,
Mm.
you know, unless you're smart and you're doing things right and putting money aside and putting toward big chunks towards your 401k and doing the right thing. But most people are like, yay, I can finally buy that new car. I can finally, get a bigger house or whatever it is. Right. So now who knows what like financial burden this guy is now in, right? What his mortgage is, what his car payments are. So anyway, so we're sitting, so we get, everything all prepared. We did give him a little bit of severance, but, again, for an executive, how far does a little bit of severance go, really, But so we're sitting across the table from him. We deliver the news, and he was just floored. I mean, he was shocked. And he even said to us, which I mean, most people are in a layoff. That's a little bit different than a termination, right? Because usually with a termination, you have a little bit more, you should be having conversations that prepare. But he literally looked at us and said, um, you know, I can't believe you're doing this to me right before Christmas. How am I going to buy Christmas gifts for my children? And I mean, it was hard. But it's hard not to, like, the human element, right? Like I said earlier, it's hard not to react to that. And like,
So what do you say? Did you apologize or right?
no,
You
I
can't
mean,
do that, right?
you can't, I mean, even in a layoff, even if you want to, you can't really apologize for the decision because once you do that, it's almost like you're saying you did something wrong, like the decision wasn't right. And you, when that decision is made, whether it's for cause or not, or voluntary, involuntary, you have to stand behind the decision, right? So, we kind of just it's really difficult in a termination sometimes. It's like one of those, I hate it, but it's one of those like whoever speaks first loses. Like in negotiations, right? They always, let's say you're negotiating, like, you go to I use this as a funny example, but like you go to a garage sale and the guy's like $10 and you're like $5. And he's like, you know, dollars. And so they say that whoever speaks first loses, right? Because the whoever's going to speak next is going to lowball themselves or whatever. So it's similar in a termination, right? Like whatever you say next either sets the precedent and the tone for how it's going to go next, but also like you never want to say something that could be, because at this point, everything being said in that room is, legally like you're ending it's a separation, it's an end of a contract. So it's you're undoing a legally binding thing, right? So anything
Can can they can they use it against you if they go to like unemployment and then they want to claim certain things, or maybe a wrongful termination lawsuit, or something like that?
I've seen it used in unemployment for situations that were more along the lines of like not necessarily a layoff, right? Because that's like kind of just a given, but like let's say it's a situation where it was an attendance, right? Somebody was like not coming to work and we're letting them go for lack of attendance. And then let's say in the termination, we're like, we know you had some things going on with your family and that's why you were late, and we're really sorry we have to do this. They could spin that to say, oh, well, they knew that I had all these extenuating circumstances and they did nothing to accommodate me. And so now here we are, they're terminating me,
Okay.
um, or, you know, in general, apologizing makes it sound like you're admitting that you shouldn't be doing it. So I have seen it doesn't always hold up. Like in unemployment's less of a worry as like some other things that like discrimination claims
Mm.
are more where it gets a little bit tricky because if you say something in that termination and that person is coming at you with a claim of wrongful termination for a reason like discrimination, it really matters what you say in that termination. Um,
Yeah.
so I think generally in a termination, you want to stick to the facts. This is why we're terminating you. This is the decision. It's, timeline to like today, effective today. Um, and then you want to keep the conversation on track, right? Because I think a lot of times people will try to go down a rabbit hole with you where they'll start asking you questions of like, well, why? Or, well, tell me exactly specific. I want to see every single time. And, if you had done you know, your prior, you had done the right thing prior and you had done proper write ups or you had performance managed, right? Like they should have already heard all those things or seen them on a document somewhere, right? So this isn't a situation to rehash all that. Don't let somebody bait you into going back down that trail because one, you don't have those things in front of you. So it's going to be impossible for you to remember exact dates and exact conversations and you'd have to refer back to all of your documentation generally, right? So if you get baited into going back down that rabbit trail, then you could say something that's not accurate that they could hold it.
Well, wouldn't you just have that paper trail in front of you on your computer or something?
Not really, like not really an termination. Typically what I do is I do have what I call like a termination letter that just is generally why we're terminating, like, like what the final situation was, right? So, like, let's say it was an attendance issue, it would say something along the lines like, that you've had this history. There have been multiple times that you've been written up, and on whatever date you were late again, and that was when we made the decision to terminate you, right?
Mm.
And then hopefully all of your prior documentation said, hey, if you don't correct this, termination is a possibility. So there's no surprise there, right? But
Yeah.
you're not going to have something that really lays out every single time, and nor should you use that termination meeting as that all should have been hashed out in those prior conversations, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
What,
you're
what,
going
what,
to sit
what,
there and start going down because it doesn't change the outcome. The person's still being terminated.
yeah. One of the things I always say is, when I was managing my team at the agency, um, uh, they should never be surprised that they're getting terminated. And honestly, I've never had to officially terminate anybody because they knew that it was coming. So they either
Resigned.
quit, yeah, they resigned before. Yeah, typically they either resigned before or there's been a few cases where they transferred to a different team. We were able to work something out. Um, but yeah, like I've never had to actually terminate somebody because they always knew that it was coming way before.
Writings on the wall. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're having performance conversations just throughout. So after 6 months, let's just say, within 6 months, and they're not the fit, right? And that's around the time that, usually I give people like 3 to 6 months of solid like training and development, and then you can kind of tell. Um, but the terminations usually happen, like around the 9 month mark, 12, sometimes a year, right? Depending on how hard they're trying, right?
Or did
Um,
they turn it around for a little bit and then
yeah.
backslid? Like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of different reasons, but throughout that whole time, every couple weeks, a month, at least minimum once a month, you're having conversations with them about their performance.
Out in that process. Yeah.
Yeah, like either they're trending upwards or they're trending downwards, and then if they're trending downwards and you're having that conversation, it's like, hey, if we don't turn this around in the next couple months, like we're gonna have a different conversation,
Right. Yeah.
you know?
Well, and I was actually recently talking to somebody about like a PIP, right? Putting somebody in a PIP. And with PIPs are interesting. PIP for those laymen is performance improvement plan. So it's a
Mhm.
little bit different than like a performance evaluation. It's more like here's all the deficiencies you because to me a write up should be used when there's a policy violation,
Yeah.
attendance, whatever. Performance improvement plans are more for like, hey, you've not been performing in these areas, you're deficient in some of the areas that we trained you in, and we're not seeing you're not getting to where we need you to be. And the point of them is to point out those deficiencies, but also really the point is not, I think people treat a PIP like it's that final warning that,
Yeah, it's like that 30-day, you
yeah,
know?
and it's supposed to be giving them ways they can turn it around. So if you lay out a very specific plan for them, that it's exactly what it says it should be. It should be a plan with you and the
But
person.
yeah, but sometimes the plan is like so outrageous, like there's no
Correct.
way that they're gonna be able
Right.
to improve. So
Right.
yeah, so I've seen a lot of companies use it as a justification.
Getting out the door. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
But I will say you have to be careful with that because one of the conversations I always have with people is I say, okay, the measurables you're about to give this person, can every single person on the team meet these?
Mm,
Because if they can't, then it looks like you're targeting this person,
mm,
right? You can't give them unrealistic goals that everyone
yeah,
else. But of course, if everyone else on your team is like meeting and exceeding those things, then you're fine, right? Like this person should
yeah,
you also in theory. And so, yeah, let's move forward. But I also told this person, I said, this goes one of two ways. Well, three ways. One is they turn it around and we don't have to at that 30-day, 60-day mark or whatever, we don't have to actually go forward with the termination. They're kind of like the veil is lifted a little bit, right? Of course, if they backslide, you still got to manage it. But, I'm like, it's, but how often does that happen? Not very often, depending on how far gone the person is. They're probably not going to be able to turn it around enough, right?
mhm.
The second scenario is they ride it out and they just end up getting fired. And because they just don't know what else to do, right? Like, I'm going to just be here. Or third, they see the writing on the wall, like you just said, and they resign because they know they can't turn it around. you know, or they use that as a segue to start looking for another job. Um,
Yeah.
so anyway, yeah, we can have a whole nother session specifically on performance improvement plans, but essentially, like, you know, like you said, they should not be surprised, right? Um, but yeah, and I've had situations where even when we've had the conversations, the person's had write-ups, all the like, markers were there, they still act shocked in a termination.
Mm,
I have another client where, you know, they had this employee was having he was sort of combative or getting into like verbal altercations with other employees. And they had had multiple conversations with this employee. Um, and he just could not seem to like get his temper or demeanor under control. So ultimately it came to, termination. And the guy, his reaction was very off-putting. I mean, it was shocking to the managers that were, doing.
what did you do?
So I like don't want to say the full words because it was so grotesque, like what he said, but he basically said "f you," but the real thing,
Hmm.
and suck my also, and then sorry, this is hey, y'all wanted to see behind the scenes at HR. This is these are the stuff we tell you that's like the ugly underbelly of like HR. This is the kind of crazy stuff that happens to people in termination. It's wild. And then he like apparently like spit on the conference table.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they were
See,
like, okay, well, they were like, well,
I
that
talk
was
to
a good
my
decision.
kids. So I talk to my kids all the time about like emotional regulation. It's like a skill. I'm like, you guys have to master this because if you don't master it when you're young, you're gonna turn into adults that don't know how to manage your emotions, and then it's gonna get in the way of like your job, relationships, blah blah blah. Because life just kind of gets harder as you get older. There's bigger problems than what you're
Right.
dealing with right now, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't know how to manage your emotions to deal with the problems, you're gonna potentially end up in jail because you do something stupid because you have an outburst, or
Run
you
your
lose your
mouth to
job
the
or you
top or something. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
emotional regulation. That's like the
Yeah.
big,
Yeah.
skill. Like
But
you
some
have to
people
know it.
just can't, like some of it's environmental, right? It was like the way people are brought up or things like that. But, some people just have a really hard time, like also just not dragging in like personal emotional things into the workplace. They get
Mm,
easily triggered, but if you don't like, intervene on that as an employer, it can become a hostile work environment for your other employees. So you kind of
yeah.
get to a point where you kind of have to do something. But yeah, I don't think that they were prepared for him to react that way. But they were like, oh, well, this like further solidified. Had he broken down and started crying and talking about how he couldn't beat his children or something like that, they could have felt a lot more compassion. But they were
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh, well, this is exactly why we just terminated you because this is what you do to our employees. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes
Yeah.
there is sounds justified is the wrong word, but sometimes you walk out of a termination and go, oh, yeah, we made the right decision. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
So
that's,
so then give me a story on the flip side where you had like a difficult, you had to let somebody go and it was very difficult from an emotional standpoint because you were friendly with them or they were a good person, but then their performance wasn't meeting up to standard.
um, so, you know, it's interesting because I talk to people about this all the time, which is why sometimes I tell people it is better if you're a smaller organization. I mean, even if you're not smaller, but typically you see it in smaller organizations where sometimes outsourcing your HR or fractionalizing it makes sense because then HR is completely unbiased at that point, right? Because they
It's
don't,
like George, you're gonna bring in a George Clooney.
right? Like they
Yeah.
don't know you, they don't know that, like, because
Yeah.
when you have in-house HR, inevitably that's their workplace just as much as it's everyone else's, right? And
Uh-huh.
we all, we talk about it, right? Yang, you and I, look how close we are now because we worked together and spent lots of time together. You know, when you work in a workplace with someone day in, day out, you know, even stuff starts to bleed into your personal life. Like people get married that meet at companies, you know,
Yeah.
what, you know, because they're like, hey, we're here $100 a week together. So like, want to get married? Yeah. Or people become friendly outside the workplace. They start to go to social things together, happy hours, or like, you know, kids' birthday. Like we both have kids the same age. You know, you just like work friends can become or work non-work friends, right? Or work family. And so that's really can become really hard when you're HR because you've emotionally connected or bonded with some of these people, right? So for me, I had a friend that, and this was at a little bit smaller, the company itself wasn't that small, but we worked in the facilities and the buildings we worked in were a
Uh-huh.
little bit closer knit. And HR was like in its totally own little building, right? And these were like old houses. And so compliance sat upstairs from us. So it was like HR on the bottom floor and compliance upstairs. And so we were in this little house together like every day, and we would go to lunch together every day. And so one of the girls that worked upstairs and I had become very friendly, and you know, we had started hanging out a little bit like outside work or whatever. And there's nothing against that, like just so you know, HR can,
Yeah.
you just have to have boundaries. You can't talk to them about like termination.
HR is not allowed. Don't invite HR to happy hour.
Yes. I hate that because my entire career being HR, it used to like kind of hurt my feelings because people would be like, you know, I'd find out about something like after the fact and I'd be like, well, why wasn't I invited? And they're like, because you're HR. I'm like, and they're like, we don't want to talk about stuff in front of you. I'm like, well, that's dumb, but okay.
The room gets all quiet as soon as you
Yeah.
walk in.
Like I still have this joke. I like actually was like laughing with at a client site the other day about like HR earmuffs,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
because they were actually sitting there talking about um the guy. I just caught a part of the conversation, but the guy was like, I don't know, I guess you probably look like you're 37. And I was like, my ears popped up, but not from like an HR perspective, just more from like a, oh my God, dude, where are you going with this? You're gonna like put your foot in your mouth, like never talk about
Yeah.
his age, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then one of the other girls turned around and was like, HR, and I was like, earmuffs. But then I like stood up and I said, "Oh, I don't even care about this from an HR perspective. I'm like over here with the popcorn. Like, how where's
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
he's like, I'm like, he's gonna get in trouble just like guessing women's ages. Like, yeah. But yeah, so anyway, her and I had started to develop a friendship, you know, not just in the workplace. And um, you know, I found out that we had to do a layoff, and you know, layoffs are inevitable sometimes, but you know, also there's decisions behind layoffs. And sometimes oh, we're cutting a whole department, or last in, first out, right? They were the last hire, the newest person. But sometimes they do pick the lower performers to be on the chopping block. Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so anyway, it's one of those things where, you know, and I've had not just this person, but multiple people say this to me before. But when I had to deliver the news to this individual, like she sat across the table and was like, how long have you known? Did you know when we were hanging out the other day? Why didn't you tell me? Like, I feel like it's unfair that you didn't give me a heads up, or like, we're friends. You should have told me. But what people don't understand is that HR, like, it's a it's an ethical violation for me to tell you something I wouldn't tell anybody else. Like, you know, it's doesn't matter what a relationship is, doesn't matter that we're friends, like, you know, and you know, luckily in that situation, you know, it took a little time. She had to kind of like let the dust settle, but we ended up remaining friends after that. Like, you know, and she actually, it was a caveat for her to go out and start her own business. And so then when I started the consulting side of HR. Like I actually consult now for her LLC, which is great. You know, like the relationship was able to be, that takes maturity for sure, right?
Yeah, I had a friend that we had to let go, and then I knew before, and I couldn't say anything. Same thing, and then
Situation.
yeah, but she didn't want to be friends with me after.
So different situation.
Yeah, so we don't talk anymore. But yeah, she was pissed. She was like
So
so
what was
mad.
the situation? Like
It was kind of like similar thing. She wasn't performing. Our client didn't want
and she
to.
was, oh, so she was a candidate.
Yeah,
You had
yeah,
placed her at a client.
yeah, yeah. But we became friends, and um, like, so anyway, so then the client wanted to replace her, and then I had known probably for like a couple weeks, right?
Yeah.
Because we were working on the replacement and stuff, and then it was my friend's, it was my partner's client, right? But like I had known about it, through that, and then yeah, I remember my partner's like, yeah, you cannot say anything, this is confidential, blah blah blah, and I'm like, of course, yeah, I know, I get it, right? And then it was hard, like not saying anything, and then
Did she
later,
say anything to you like
well,
later?
yeah, she came over like to like chat because her office was like right next to our office. And then so after she got let go, she comes over and she's like sad, and then she sees my face and she could tell like I knew, right?
Um,
Yeah. And I'm like, I have a terrible poker face. Um
me too. Except in terminations. Except in
yeah,
terminations.
yeah,
I can
yeah,
turn it off. Like, but yeah.
yeah. Well, I felt bad for her, but then yeah, and then afterwards she like felt betrayed, I didn't say anything, blah blah blah, but it's part of the job.
It's really hard when it is somebody that you know or that you're closer to, right?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, then there's the flip side of that. I had a guy one time that I was not like I didn't know him that well, so this was a little bit bigger of a company, and we had like lots of people who worked like in the field. So I knew who they were by name, seeing them on payroll and stuff. But like some people I had like really not met in person, right? Like maybe talk to him over the phone, like to answer a benefits question or something. But so this guy, and it was a performance based situation, but I was kind of like trying to prepare for the termination. So I'm like asking people like, so what's this guy like? Like, I've never met him, you know? And they're like, well, he's kind of like, he likes, they're trying to describe him, but without being like discriminatory. They're like, he likes to hunt and he's very outdoorsy. And they're telling me all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, okay, okay. And they're like, oh, and by the way, he carries a gun. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? Like, he does what?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, he doesn't bring it into the office because they were at an offsite warehouse. They're like, he doesn't bring it into the warehouse because, there's no guns on premises, but he keeps it in his car. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Well, that's even better. All right. I mean, so as long as the car is not parked on premises, there's really no violation if your policy says that, right? Like, so so that way if you leave work, because I mean, listen, we're in Texas, right? So, and this was before open carry. This was more like when but you could have a license, you could still have a CHL and carry it.
Yeah.
And so I guess he had it in his car so that when he left work, he would have it on him, right? Um, but I'm like starting to get nervous because I'm like, well, I gotta terminate this guy, you know? So he comes to the corporate office, right? Or I mean, I'm sure he knew as soon as like somebody at an off-site place gets called to corporate, they're like, something's going on, right? Like it's
Mm.
already like you kind of get like you get a warning, so to speak. So he knew, he was very stoic and like staring at me during the tour, like just very cold, like didn't say much. And I was just like, like it was uncomfortable. Um, but I did not realize that because he had come from the warehouse, he had a bunch of stuff in his like company property in his car. Like
Mm.
he had a laptop and some like other equipment because these were IT guys that were like installing stuff. So it was like, they had installation equipment or whatever. So I'm like, oh God, okay. So somebody's like, oh, well, we're gonna have to escort him to the car to get all of our company property back. And I'm like, not by myself, I'm not, because I know, like, right about this potential gun that's in the car. And like, of course, my mind just goes to like worst case scenario of like, you know, disgruntled, he's going to be postal, whatever, you know. So I actually, and of course, like I'm thinking about all this, like as it's transpired, he's sitting in the room. So I'm like, how do I pivot and deal with this like in on the fly? So he didn't really, he's not at corporate very often. So he didn't really know what a typical termination looked like. So I went and got the building security and had them walk with us out to his car. Um, then that might have looked strange probably to a normal employee, but like he didn't, I mean, he might have just thought that was protocol, you know?
Yeah. Isn't that what you normally do when you don't you have security escort people out?
It depends on the office environment, right? Like
Mm.
some people aren't in a corporate building, you know? If
That's
you're in
true.
a building where people badge in and out, that's super easy. You cut their badge like while they're being terminated, you know? There's like you have
Yeah.
to go through certain protocols to like make sure that once they exit the building, they can't get back in,
So
right?
some of the companies I worked at, they had every termination, security was always involved, and they would escort them out.
And I think that's not necessarily like a bad thing to think about. I think
Yeah.
you have to know what makes sense. And we live in a very different world, right? And we'll reserve this for another podcast where we talk about like, you know, emergency response. But essentially, yeah, I mean, I think it's situational where you're located, where your office is. Do you have security at your disposal, whatever it is?
Yeah.
Right? Because even after the one I was telling you about, the guy that spit on the table
Hmm.
and cursed them out, I was thinking my immediate thought was this particular client has a front door that doesn't have like an HID card or like if she
Mm. Did
opened the door,
did they have security there?
nope. And I was so my immediate thought was, what if this guy returned?
Yeah.
You know? So then, you know, then I'm having discussions with them like maybe you should think about putting in some kind of access point for that or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, get rid of solicitors because
Mm.
that's one of their complaints is that like solicitors kind of walk in a lot and like leave
Mm.
drop pamphlets and cards. And I'm like, well, they can't walk in if your door is secure, you know? But yeah, I mean, that was one where I mean, it's not like I would say I was like scared for my life, but it's definitely one of those things where you have to think about it because you don't know what the mindset of someone is in that moment.
Yeah.
What if there was like a bunch of other really terrible things going on in their life and this just sent them over the edge,
Yeah, exactly.
you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I think for terminate, so to say all this, I'm not trying to scare every business owner out there and try to scare every HR, you know, person who's green and hasn't had to do the difficult ones yet. You know, none of this is to scare you or to make you worry about a termination. If you're prepared for it, it will go smoother and it you will feel better, right?
Mhm.
But I think some key things to remember. One is there's a lot of prep. People don't realize like there are things you need to do and have ready to go to prep for a termination. Like I was talking about cutting access. You want to have basically that happening. You don't want to cut it too early because then they know, right? So you want to have all that kind of going while you're in there
Mhm.
have these preliminary conversations with IT or someone in your organization, if you're a smaller company, where you're saying, okay, while we're in there doing this termination, like cut their, you know, email access, their systems access, their building access, like, you know, whatever, all that's transpiring. Um, and then because you also, besides the getting back in the building factor, you don't want them to be able to take proprietary information or clients or whatever. Um, you know, the other one I get asked a lot too is about personal items because, okay, I think we've all seen it where people will like put have their entire life at their desk. You know what I'm talking about? We all know the Karens. Sorry if your name is Karen, that have like, I mean, they've got plants. I went into a client one time that had a fish tank, but not just like a fish bowl that has like a beta fish in it. it was a full functioning, like plugged in with the little filter. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Her desk. I was like,
Yeah.
what? Then there was another lady who had like plants everywhere. Like she like lived in a jungle. I was like, she has like every plant like
There's this one candidate. Uh, after they left, we went to go retrieve their personal items, and they found weed.
like in their desk. They were just like,
Yeah,
oh, some weed.
yeah. I guess during the lunch break or something, they went down to like smoke a joint or something. I don't know, but
Wow.
yeah. So they found like like weed and a pipe, and,
So
and they're like, we don't know what to do with it, So they're
throw
like,
it in
well,
the
like
trash.
here you go.
Or, yeah. Well, so like, so the last thing you want to do is stand there and let somebody pack like for 2 hours, whatever, I'm exaggerating, but because especially in like cubicle environments, people sit next
Yeah,
to it, it just
it's like
creates, it
super
draws
awkward.
a
Yeah,
ton of attention. Well, and then people start walking by and they're like, what's happening? Oh my God, you're leaving. And people start crying and hugging each other. I'm like, whoa, this has gotten real out of hand. So
yeah,
I kind of started to get to where I don't let them go back to their desk. Like, let's say that they had their like, of course they need their purse, like if it's a woman or something, like, to get their car and whatever. I'll like say that, like, I'm gonna walk with you to get your purse, but we are going to send you or courier all of your other stuff. So we've done that a lot. Yeah, there's an expense to that. Yeah, there's some logistics to that. But I think it's well worth it to just have them exit as quickly as possible. One, for your own benefit, but for theirs too. So they don't have that like embarrassment of like, we've all seen the like, I mean, our younger listeners will not remember this, but Enron, right? There were all those pictures on the news of people carrying out or Goldman Sachs or whatever, like carrying like boxes of their personal effects like out of the building. It's like people know when you're doing that what's going on. It's like very apparent that you're getting terminated, like, or that something just went down. So I try to spare them that too, right? I'm like, let's go out the back door. I've even let people go out like the emergent, like, or the back exit or whatever makes them more comfortable, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
then I
yeah,
just
yeah,
send them all their stuff, like courier it to them. Or same thing for remote employees. If I've had to terminate a remote employee that like wasn't coming into the office to get terminated, I've actually had it to where we've had a courier service go collect the laptop or monitors, whatever, from their home. So they didn't have to like come in and do the
yeah,
addressing, turn in all the things,
yeah.
So
So
go ahead.
So yeah, so just to kind of wrap up, so the main thing is be prepared, have all of your documentation, do all the things leading up to the termination to make sure there's no surprises there, and then kind of think through the termination itself and how to protect yourself, protect the company, um, have safeguards in place just in case, things like that, right?
And I would say one last little takeaway is, if a termination starts to go sideways, like somebody starts to get emotional or tries to derail or tries to get you to like admit something or whatever, what I always go back to if I get into hot water in a termination where I just go, look, we're not going to go into all that. That's not why we're here. We're here to let you know again that, that you're being terminated effective immediately. The decision's been made. I just go in a circle and say the same thing over and over. Basically, the decision's been made. And then if like, I've even sat there where it's been like awkward silence. And then I finally have to say, I just have to move it through, right? I just have to finally,
Yeah,
okay, so now we're going to go like take you to your desk. And I start making that movement towards the door, or I start doing something that will like move it along.
yeah, yeah.
I think the important thing is just not to like get emotional back to them or say the wrong thing or apologize. You just stick to the facts. The decision's been made. Try to move the termination along as quickly as possible.
Sounds good. All right. Well, it was great talking to you.
Good to see you,
Thanks for the
Yang.
stories, and stay tuned for the next episode. It'll be coming your way next week. And once again, if you have any stories that you want to submit, you can do it in the link below. And we'll see y'all next week.
All right. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.